Disability, Recruitment and Retention, Part 1. Thank you. So, I got a question for you. How well are you doing in terms of disability recruitment? How well are you doing? Sorry, I can't hear. Okay. Yep, not very well, hey? Any more? Struggling? Yep, you're not kidding. Yep, you're struggling. Let me show you why. So on the screen, we have a cartoon. For those of you who can't see, don't worry, I'm going to walk you through it. We have a cartoon. It's clearly a restaurant. It's quite an attractive cartoon in the sense that it's quite disability friendly, because there's a big picture of a wheelchair on the restaurant. There's signage there saying, everybody welcome. Then it also says something like, Disability Day Special. So clearly it's a attractive, disability friendly restaurant. But can you see anything wrong with it? Give me some ideas. Yep. No ramps. What else? No dogs. What else? Tow-away zone. Yep, tow-away zone. So actually what the cartoon depicts is a restaurant that says it's disability friendly. But in reality it has some serious physical accessible problems. No dogs, no ramps, tow-away zone. So here's a question for you. Is it going to be easy for a person with a disability to access that restaurant and enjoy it? And the answer is no. No. So welcome to disability and employment, because that's the reality. Is that as long as we maintain barriers, regardless of how much lip service we pay to the idea of recruitment and retention of persons with disabilities, as long as we maintain the barriers, we're not going to succeed. You're trying very hard, it's true. The fact is, though, is that in the face of broad-based, in the face of broad-based obstacles and barriers and attitudinal barriers, you will continue to struggle. Ruth is quite correct. The fundamental core of successful disability employment is, in fact, awareness and sensitization. There's no question about that. But the point is, though, is that you're trying really hard, but often in the face of complete and utter obstacle and barrier. And I put it to you that there's no such thing as a physical barrier. I really mean that. I don't believe for a moment there's such a thing as a physical barrier, because most barriers, almost all barriers, were created by people. If those people thought long enough, and if that foolish architect built that school still inaccessibly in 2013, and if he had thought for a little bit and designed a school that was accessible, we wouldn't have a problem with accessing that school. Barriers are created by people, and they're created by people because they haven't thought the thing through. And so, unfortunately, we have a situation where we have mainstream society, which is largely unattainable by persons with disabilities. On the cartoon, hopefully it's there, Vincent and others who can't see, the cartoon depicts a mainstream world in the background. There's mainstream education, mainstream jobs, mainstream transport, mainstream commercial activities. And in the foreground, there are two individuals. Sorry for the stereotype, but one has to depict somehow. And there's a chap in a wheelchair and a person with a white cane, presumably blind. And they are struggling to get to that background world of mainstream because there's a barrier in the way. In their path is a barrier, and the barrier is labeled attitudinal barriers. The fact is that people with disabilities have been excluded from mainstream society for generations, in fact, millennia. And so it's not simple enough just to say, okay, we're going to create a job. There's a job for you, pull in. There's a workplace opportunity, pull in. There's a learnership, pull in. What's wrong with you guys? We're not seeing any CVs. That's the oldest paradox. I'm sure anybody here who's been in this business like I have for the last 15 years, ever since the Employment Equity Act, will smile when I said that. How often haven't we who have tried to peddle CVs, not that I'm an agent, but I mean I've been known to do it, haven't tried rather hard, and then hear from the employers that we never see any disabled CVs. Tell me we haven't heard that. Okay? That's the risk we're playing, is that we're fighting against a millennia-old attitude or paradigm of exclusion of persons with disabilities into mainstream society. And it's our job to break down those barriers, to include. The idea right now is inclusion. Right, so next slide. We should have 3 circles on the screen. Those of you who can't see, 3 circles on the screen. Disregard the bottom 2. And the top circle says compliance and legislative view. Now, what am I doing here? This is called a perspective view. And I'm going to give you an idea of why we're struggling. Now, I want you all to do a favor for me. I want you... Okay, no, I'll get you to do that just now. Let me explain one thing first. Tell me what legislation in this country supports disability? What legislation in this country supports disability? Louder for me, I can't hear. Constitution, certainly, except that's more of an umbrella legislation. It's not something you can easily use. But that's fine. Constitution, what else? Employment Equity Act. Thank you. Very good. What else? Really? Have I got news for you, ma'am? No, I think we can exclude that. Thank you. It's done more damage than anything else. But if you insist, we can include it. What the hell? We can include it. No, what the hell? Next one. What else? Yeah, but it's okay, fair enough, but that's not our legislation. It's true we should be looking at it. Yeah, fine. But it's not really a usable legislation in this country, as much as we love it to bits. It's not ours. Okay, what else? What other homegrown South African legislation is there? Yeah? Thank you. That's not what I asked, though. What I asked was, what legislation supports disability? Hey? Can't hear. IMDF. That's not legislation, that's a white paper. That's about as usable as second-hand toilet paper, I'm afraid. No, I said legislation. Legislation. Thank you. That's not bad. That's not bad. It does acknowledge disability, it's true. It does acknowledge disability, true, but it's not explicitly disability. No, that's the Constitution. A lady brought it up earlier. Now, so the answer is there isn't much, is there? But the majority that there is what? Labor-related. Right. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you all to make your hands into a tunnel. Put your hands together so that you're looking through a tunnel. And then blinker your eyes. So do this. All of you. If only you knew how silly you looked. And coming from me, you really got to know. No, keep doing it. Keep doing it. Look now watch me. Okay, look towards me. How much perspective are you seeing of the rest of the room? Nothing. Nothing. Now here's why I'm saying this. If the only usable and meaningful legislation in the country is work-related or employment-related, okay, such as the Employment Equity Act, and trust me, that's the only one with any kind of explicit mandate. The Labour Relations Act has a bit of an inclusion. The Skills Development Act has a bit of an inclusion. But the only really explicit one is the Employment Equity Act. If your only legislation supporting disability in the country, usable, not the Constitution, but usable, is labour-related, what legislation is helping the other parts that influence disability? In other words, does the Employment Equity Act have any jurisdiction outside of employment? Does it have any influence in public transport? Does it have any influence in education? Does it have any influence in housing? Welfare? Now you know why I got you to do that. You're looking at disability through such a narrow lens. You're looking at disability through the minutest lens and seeing one element only of life, which is employment. There's way more to life. Not one of you would be in this room without education. Not one of you doesn't go to the shop at some point in the day or in the week. Not one of you doesn't travel either by public transport or by your own transport getting to and from work, etc. You all have a life outside of work. And if your only legislation supporting disability is work-related, then what's looking after the rest? And so my invitation to you is to step back and take some perspective. Have some perspective. And so the invitation now is to look at the bottom two circles. And for those of you who can't see, the bottom two circles are, on the left-hand side, the human rights case. What is the human rights case? Have we ascertained what Andre brought it up in a manner of speaking. There was some element in what she was mentioning in terms of the human rights aspect. What is the reality of disability in the country? That's the human rights case, or the human rights view. And then the third view you want to look at is the business case. This is the best kept secret of all. How often do we consider disability as our customers? And the customers of a city are your citizens, and the customers of a province are your citizens. So when the city council says, oh, we need to employ more people with disabilities, and they've been saying that sort of half-heartedly for the last 20 years, and yet they only have, I can remember when they had 24 people with disabilities, they employed 24,000 people. And I said to them, well, are you really surprised? If you don't look after your citizens with disabilities, why on earth would they want to work for you? So that's the business case. That's the business case. So look at all three. I call this a trinocular view. Instead of only obsessing around employment of persons with disabilities, it's not the whole story. You've got to click lenses and have a look at the human rights case as well. And what you'll see very quickly is that the human rights case and the business case impact your ability to comply legislatively. You are struggling. There's no question about it. You are definitely struggling. And guess what? You will continue to struggle until you take some perspective and you start looking at disability in the whole picture, the holistic view. Because if you maintain it, you're going to look like that restaurant continuously. Just to highlight a little bit about the human rights case, just a cartoon, just to demonstrate the human rights case. It's a cartoon of a skeleton. Those of you who can't see it, it's a skeleton sitting in a wheelchair waiting for public transport. It's been that long. We have been waiting for a while now. Okay, so that's a classic example of the human rights case. And then another lovely cartoon which demonstrates the business case. It's a wonderful thing. Those of you who can't see, what it says is, it's clearly an officious-looking individual demanding why this hotel hasn't or isn't accessible. And the hotel manager says to this individual, but why should I make my hotel accessible? We never have any disabled guests. Gee, I wonder why. So that's your business case, all right? So moving on, and we're now going to get to, having said that, now you got why I wanted you to get some background. Now we can start playing a little bit with the employment or the recruitment and retention of persons with disabilities. It all must be seen in the context. It must be seen in the context. And if you embrace that context, those of you in the room, particularly you guys at DDAT, if you embrace that entire context, instead of fixating and focusing too deeply on employment alone, you will succeed. You will succeed.